There were many new concepts and mechanics introduced into Xenoblade 3, with one of my favourites being the power of Ouroboros. This seemingly straightforward ability, unlocked at the start of the game, holds many secrets and provides some interesting implications for the future of the Xenoblade series. That's why today, I'll be explaining the truth behind Ouroboros, including what the power is, how it works, and the differences it shares with Moebius. With all of that established, let's get right into the video. The power of Ouroboros is best explained when split up into two parts. The first is simply the addition or inclusion of a key within all of the Ouroboros members. This is due to the process that Nia mentioned before.
Through a process of catalysis between the origin substrate and the core in my chest, I can generate the stones,
which allows Nia to share her own key and access to Origin with others. This is also the same case and concept for the Sword of the End, with the only difference being that that key comes from Melia. As for what the keys actually are, think of them like admin privileges over the computer of Origin. Having a key allows one to access, control, or manipulate the systems of Origin to their very will, and exhibit the powers I discussed in my Explaining Origin video, which you can check out after this one. These privileges are then ultimately what unlocks the other powers of Ouroboros, like class switching, a function that is normally locked away from the soldiers of Ionios, as well as the major part of the power, interlinking. This is the second part of Ouroboros, which is brought on and unlocked through the first. As we know, interlinking allows two beings hailing from either worlds to merge into one form, which is dubbed as Ouroboros. I'm going to explain the specifics of how this is possible and how it works later in the video, but for now, all you need to understand is that these forms are attached to and represent a person's soul. This is proven through the fact that Mia was able to switch bodies and retain the Ouroboros powers, as well as through the designs themselves. Each form represents and is based off of their human forms, with Noah having a sword ponytail thing in his Ouroboros, Mia retaining her cat ears, and Senna keeping flames at the end of this thing. Even their blades are practically the exact same as what they normally use, including lands if you consider the sword, shield, Gatling gun a type of multi-weapon. These interlinked forms are then generated from the core in their chests, and allow them to regenerate indefinitely until they overheat, and this includes the Agnians. Whilst it might appear that their cores are located elsewhere throughout their body and that there are multiple of them, they are actually fake and appear to be a purely cosmetic design choice, due to the fact that they still regenerate from their center. I speculate that these are either to represent the origination of their world, with one core for the Xenoblade 1 side of the cast and two for those descending from Ulrest, or that one of these cores actually represents their existing core crystals. Personally, I'm leaning towards the latter due to how the Ouroboros forms actually work, but I admittedly might be looking a little too much into this. Ultimately, these forms are amped up versions of their original bodies, proving to be more effective weapons. But at this point, conceptually, they are exactly the same as interlinked Moebius. Even so, how does all of this actually work? What's all the science and logic behind it? Well, let's start from the beginning with Nia imprinting onto Origin metal to create the stones. Effectively, with this process, Nia is using her core crystal, which stores information, to transfer data to the shard of Origin metal. It doesn't have to be a gear from Origin though, as was implied by this scene, as the stone that actually awakens the party looks exactly like the part that Salmon is holding, which was required for the boat. Anyways, Nia is effectively programming commands into this shard so that when it is activated, it performs action A, B, C, D, and so on. Specifically, the stone initially creates what is known as the Hilbert effect, which was introduced in Xenosaga. It's used in that game to transfer gnosis that exist in the imaginary number domain to a lower one, where they can then be attacked and defeated, and is actually the exact same concept that Shulk uses when fighting the Fog King in Future Connected. In essence, what this effect is doing is squeezing the different domains together, meaning that they can actually harm those on another plane of reality, like Moebius. After doing so, the next stage of Ouroboros takes place, which is the rewriting and encoding of data from the stone into the Ouroboros candidates. As I mentioned before, this changes a person's very soul, ingraining the power onto their very being, causing the Ouroboros symbol to manifest within their irises and blades. But it also changes some aspects of them on a genetic level as well. The people of the city are bound together via Ouroboros blood, due to them being the descendants of the original Ouroboros members, meaning that some aspects of the power became hereditary. Explicitly, the radio wave Ouroboros emits, as well as the aptitude to truly become Ouroboros. We'll come back to the aptitude point in a little bit, but the radio wave signal is almost certainly an ether wavelength. Think of it kind of like the Monado from Xenoblade 1, which also releases a similar signal, ultimately attracting the Teletheus spawn to Shulk's location. The theory behind it is the exact same, except for the fact that the irises are not Monados, so it would be more accurate to say that the information inserted into them is effectively a Monado art. Now this will get very complex if I try to explain in detail, but think of the Ouroboros symbol in the irises as the art symbol, showing that the art can be activated, which raises the question of what is activating it. Well, the obvious answer to me would be Origin. Now that might seem like a bit of a cop-out, but considering what else Origin can actually do, I don't think it's that unlikely for there to be some replica Monado and Apocrypha generator technology inside of Origin, which is actually all you would need to make this possible. Essentially, the party are using Origin as a Monado, through the access granted to them via Nia, to activate the Monado art within them, taking the form of Ouroboros. That just leaves the explanation of what the Monado art is actually doing, or in other words, how the Ouroboros forms are created. Well, initially, both members begin to dematerialize as the matter making up their bodies is partially used to reconstruct the Ouroboros form. Meanwhile, their consciousnesses are smooshed together, allowing either one to access the other's memories. This is then what forms the Ouroboros core, which stores the data for both recipients, or more specifically, their soul and consciousness. From there, the core redirects particles in the surrounding area to make up the body of the Ouroboros. This is constructed out of the matter that made them up originally, as well as ether and a large amount of the black fog. With everything then in place, the primary member, whom the form is based off of, can then control their new Ouroboros form and wield it to their heart's content, until it eventually overheats. That's the long and short of it, but let's break it down with a fine-tooth comb. The core that makes up the Ouroboros forms is effectively the exact same as a core crystal from Xenoblade 2. Blades are awakened via core crystals, which, once again, stores their data or soul and consciousness. Their bodies are then constructed out of a combination of the Cloud Sea's particulate reconstructors and ether, the latter of which can be seen throughout a blade's body. This is where the black fog comes in, as the Cloud Sea is absent from the world of Ionios, and therefore a replacement is required. As you can probably see at this point though, conceptually, the Ouroboros forms are the exact same as a blade, which makes sense. The power did originate from Nia and her core crystal, and Chapter 7 Xenoblade 2 spoilers, but Nia is a blade, and when you add that into the mix, this all starts to make a lot of sense, like how the forms regenerate, just like a blade, and how a certain aptitude is required to become Ouroboros, just like how one is required to awaken a blade. That said, a consequence of using the black fog instead of the Cloud Sea is that the forms are prone to overheating and annihilating. I explained why and how the black fog causes annihilation events in a previous video, and due to that phenomenon, the interlinked forms over time will get closer and closer to annihilating, which is what we can see when they begin to overheat. In the same sense, the bodies regenerating over and over again after limbs have been severed causes more and more black fog to enter the interlinked body, shortening the amount of time one can stay in that form for. Of course, when one gets close to annihilating, a pretty annoying beeping sound starts, which is played to those who are controlling the form. I think this is due to Origin and is simply a safety measure to alert the interlinkees that the form will soon annihilate. Why Origin though, and not just another program in the Monado art? Well, that comes down to the fact that interlinked Moebius also also have this warning system, leading me to the conclusion that it is a part of Origin instead. And of course, we all know what happens when we ignore it. With that all in mind, Ouroboros and Moebius might look quite similar in how they function, but there are some important key differences between them. The major one being Moebius themselves are higher domain beings. Wildride states that Ouroboros are one step away from being on the same level as Moebius, and this is due to the true nature of their being. Normally, Moebius don't have a physical body, as is shown with Zed, and so their quote-unquote human bodies are constructed the exact same way as Ouroboros, in that they have a core in the center and are made up of the black fog, which is why, when N was wounded by the Sword of Origin, black fog leaked out of his core. These cores therefore function in the same sense as before, and are present when interlinking, adding to the conclusion I led to before that they represent core crystals. Their physical appearances are also quite different, due once again to their true nature. Moebius appear to be more organic because they are already higher domain beings, and therefore these forms are more akin to their regular bodies, resulting in them having more defining features, like working mouths and an actual complete body. On the other hand, Ouroboros are more mechanical, since these forms are attained through the Monado art, which can be likened to a computer program, through the fact it is simply commands and processes. We also need to keep in mind though that Nia was only able to resist Zed to a small extent, which further limits the power and functions that she and an extension Ouroboros could wield. A large portion of the Ouroboros' bodies, normally around their cores, are largely transparent, likely being an example of this limited power, preventing them from even forming a complete body. Whilst the process and concept might be very similar for Ouroboros and Moebius, the end results of the both of them are actually quite different, so it's important to remember that they are not one and the same. And with that, Ouroboros are explained. If you found this video informative and useful, I'd appreciate it if you'd click that like button and subscribe to the channel, as it helps me bring you more amazing content like this one. I appreciate you all for watching this far into the video though, and hope to catch you in the next one. This is JB, signing off.